Jaya Śrīman Nārāyaṇa. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharmarashtra Jayate. Suryavansha Jayate. Om Hrihi Om. Namaste everyone, and welcome to our latest live stream satsangha. This is brought to you by the International Sanatana Dharma Society, and it is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you tonight. Before we jump into the topic of tonight's live stream and my discourse and then questions and answers, first I just want to say a few quick things, actually, a few announcements and some other things I want to just speak about very briefly. First of all, as people may remember, last year we had a very special day around this time that we called Holy Name Day. And this was something in which on a certain date and at a certain time, we encouraged everyone all together at that exact moment to recite Om Namo Nārāyaṇaya 108 times. And this with the idea of several things. First of all, there being this beautiful sense of international community, knowing that as you yourself were meditating upon this divine mantra, that there were thousands and thousands of other people throughout the world who also were meditating at the exact same time. So thus forming that beautiful sense of spiritual community that we had when we did this last year. But it's also with the idea of asking God for his blessings, asking God very specifically to help us, to protect us, and to save us from the darkness that has descended upon the earth, and that has been here with us for so long now, at least hundreds of years, if not much longer than even that, and more, to prepare spiritually for the year to come. Well, this is something that, again, we did last year, and my announcement is that we're going to be doing this again this year. And not only will we be doing this again this year, but this is a day that we will celebrate every single year from now on. And very specifically, this day will be December 26th at 7 p.m. Central Time. 7 p.m. Central Time. And what we are going to be doing is, again, this will be Holy Name Day, what we are calling Holy Name Day. And the idea is very simply, at that exact time, it's going to be a Sunday, at least in America. I know in other places, like in Australia, for example, it will be Monday already. But at least for many of us, it will be Sunday, December 26th at 7 p.m. Very simply, all together, we will recite the mantra Om Namo Nārāyaṇaya 108 times wherever we find ourselves. And we will ask God for his benedictions, for his blessings, and we will ask that God grace us by ushering in a new golden age. So this is what we will be doing again on that day. And for any of you who are connected to us on social media, whether it's Telegram or Facebook or Gab or anywhere else, Twitter, you'll see announcements about this starting in just a few days. So you'll have many, many reminders that indeed that date, December 26th, 7 p.m. Central Time, that will be Holy Name Day. So look for those announcements. And if you're not plugged into us on social media, Well, please do so. To find out where all of our social media is, very simply, just go to the description of this video and you'll see all the links to, again, everything: Twitter, Gab, Facebook, Telegram, all of our other video channels on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, etc., etc. So please go to the description of this video, look toward the bottom, and join all of those if you can. And in that way, you'll get announcements pretty much immediately as soon as we make them. The other thing I wanted to say is, as usual, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to this channel. Please like this video. Please comment on the video once it's available, especially as a video, as a recording. The other thing is, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. And when you're visiting Dharma Central, please join our email list that you'll see available right there. There will be a way that you can join our email list. Please take a look at our books that are available there for purchase. We have a beautiful CD as well. Please consider also becoming a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, the movement that is sponsoring these live streams every single Monday. By becoming a member, you help us in so many ways. You tithe a little something to help the ISDS. It could be any amount that you wish: $5, $50, $500, $5,000 per month, whatever you wish, as little or as much as you desire. The last thing I'm going to say is that indeed we are still very much in the midst of our year-end fundraising campaign. So if you can please find it within your heart to be so generous as to do so, please donate to the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And again, to do that, all you have to do is you go to dharmacentral.com and you just look at our donate page. We also have an actual fundraising page there as well. Feel free to go there and simply you can make a one-time donation, or again, you can become a member and have a recurring donation monthly. So again, I thank you very much for listening to those announcements. Now we're going to dive into the talk for today, which is All-Pervading Vishnu. And very specifically, I'm going to be looking at a beautiful verse that is here from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you want to follow along, again, look at the description of this video. The verse is there. But this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's Canto 11, Chapter 3, verse 35. And this is how the verse proceeds. Śrī Pippalāyana said, Nārāyaṇa is the cause of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this universe. Yet he has no prior cause. He pervades the various states of wakefulness, dreaming, and unconscious deep sleep, and also exists beyond them. By entering the body of every living being as the Supersoul, the Paramatman, he enlivens the body, senses, life airs, and mental activities, and thus all the subtle and gross organs of the body begin their functions. My dear King, know that Nārāyaṇa to be the Supreme. Very nice. Wonderful. So again, as always, wonderful, beautiful verse. So many of these verses are truly wondrous. And that on the one hand, let me talk about this for a moment actually, because I'm someone who, my life is one that is steeped in literature, actually. I've read all the epics of the world, actually, but I also just love literature, especially religious literature, ancient literature. The more ancient it is, as far as I'm concerned, the better. But I also like poetry, history, just so many things. And it is interesting how with so many of these verses that we look at, including this one, they both are philosophical in content, but also beautifully expressed. This is the nature of Vedic scripture, that the Vedic scriptures go extremely deep into the most important topics that a human being can ever contemplate. They are extremely philosophical, extremely depthful in so many ways, but at the same time, it's not like reading a cold academic textbook. No, on the contrary. The Vedic scriptures also express themselves beautifully, beautifully, as literature should. These scriptures express themselves poetically and truly beautifully. And again, you can see this in the English translation, but especially if you know the Sanskrit and if you read the Sanskrit, you can barely even get a taste of just how beautiful this literature is by just reading translations. It's when you look at the Sanskrit especially that you realize, oh my God, these works express themselves so truly, poetically, and beautifully that there is nothing like these works in existence. This is why we take the Vedic scriptures so seriously, is because, again, it is a perfect combination of rigidly logical philosophy, but expressed with sweetness, with aesthetic sweetness. So, all that being said, I just had to say that. Let's look a little bit into what this specific verse is saying about the all-pervasive nature of Vishnu or Nārāyaṇa. So first, this great sage is saying, Nārāyaṇa is the cause of three things: the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this universe. So let's stop there for a moment. As people know, when it comes to the idea of cosmogony, very specifically, that is the idea of the universe, how it comes into being, how it functions, but then how it eventually goes out of being, etc. The Vedic scriptures explain these three processes in enormous depth, with enormous clarity and a lot of specificity. You know, there's no mystery about how the universe is created, how it's maintained, how it goes out of existence, etc. And more, it's also understood, especially by Westerners, that there are three beings who are, let's say, in charge of these three phases of existence of any given universe. And there are many universes, and they all go through these three stages. So we know that it is Brahma, the creator being, the creator God, not God himself, but a demigod who is given the task of bringing the material universe into being. That is Brahma. We also know that when it comes to maintenance, there is a, let's say, tertiary expansion of Nārāyaṇa, of Vishnu, who is in charge of maintaining every single individual universe. So each universe, of which there are an unlimited number of universes, each one has a Vishnu who maintains. But then ultimately, when it's time for that universe to come to its natural dissolution, that is Shiva, or Nataraja, Shiva, who is in charge of that. So for the most part, people understand this concept of this Trimurti, these three beings who are in charge of these three phases of any given universe. Now, what is interesting is that what this verse is saying is something very clear and, let's say, much more of a meta-narrative on top of the idea of the Trimurti. And that is that even these three beings and more, these three modes that any given universe goes through, ultimately it is Nārāyaṇa who is the cause of all three of these things. So it is Nārāyaṇa ultimately who is the cause of the creation of a universe. How is this the case? Well, Brahma, quote unquote, creates the universe, but he derives all of his power and instruction very specifically from Vishnu, from Nārāyaṇa. So that's the first thing. When it comes to maintenance, Vishnu himself does the maintenance of the universe. Vishnu himself is the sustainer. And the reason why this is the case is indeed because to maintain is the most difficult of things. It is the most sattvic of things. So therefore, this is something that Vishnu himself does. But then when it comes to the destruction of the universe also, even though Shiva is the secondary being who is in charge of destruction, Shiva also derives all of his power from his source, who is Nārāyaṇa. So in this way, this is how this great sage can say that ultimately it is Nārāyaṇa himself who is the cause of the creation, maintenance, and the destruction of this universe, and then by extension, really all the universes. Why? How? Why? How? How is this the case? Why can we say this about Nārāyaṇa and not any other being? In the last clause, this is explained. Yet he has no prior cause. In other words, Vishnu alone, Nārāyaṇa alone, is the Karana Karanam. He is that being who is the cause of all causes, who in himself has no cause. So he is the first cause of all things. This is Nārāyaṇa. And this is why this statement can be so easily made, that indeed it is Nārāyaṇa who is the cause of everything. So let's go on a little bit more. Continuing to speak about Nārāyaṇa, the verse continues. He pervades the various states of, and now there is a list of really 4 things that are given here, of wakefulness, dreaming, and unconscious sleep, and also exists beyond them. So it's interesting for anyone who is very conversant with yoga literature, with the Upanishadic literature especially. We know that this list of 4 things is actually something that is quite well known, and that is stated again and again in various scriptures in various ways. These are the, let's say, 4 states of awareness, 4 states of consciousness. Really, awareness is what they are. And every human being goes through these 4 states, has these 4 states. So let's go through these very, very quickly. First of all, there is the state of wakefulness. This is what is called Jagrat. Jagrat, not Jagat. Jagat, very similar sounding word, means material universe. This is Jagrat with an R in it, Jagrat. This is the state of just everyday wakefulness. So I am awake right now, thus I can give a lecture, I can look around, I can do things, I can have a sip of water, etc. So just normative wakefulness. When we are awake, Vishnu is here. Vishnu pervades our world. When we are awake, Vishnu pervades everything that is external to us, but Vishnu also pervades us as well. Vishnu is here, residing within our heart region. So that's the first state of awareness. Then there is the state of dreaming while sleeping. This is known as svapna. Svapna. This is when we are asleep, but we are dreaming. This is a secondary form of awareness in which, again, we still are aware, but it's a very subtle sort of awareness. It is an awareness in which we are operating on an ontological plane that is much more subtle than the gross plane that we're operating in when we are fully awake. Vishnu also is present there. Nārāyaṇa is also present even when we're sleeping and we are dreaming. God is there. And then Sushupti, there is the unconscious deep sleep. That deep sleep in which seemingly we are not dreaming and there is nothing that is seemingly going on. The truth of the matter is we still have awareness. But this state also ontologically is so refined, is so subtle, is so much closer to our normative state of pure consciousness, to the point where once we are awakened, to us it seems as if we were not even aware at all. But the truth of the matter is, when we were in that state, we were aware. We simply forget. See, some people make this mistake. Some people will say, oh, but wait a minute, when I'm sleeping and I'm not dreaming and nothing is going on, it's as if I'm dead. It's as if nothing is happening whatsoever because I don't remember anything. That's the problem. You don't remember. But the truth of the matter is, even in that state, you were in a state of pure awareness. There was awareness that was there, but the awareness was an awareness such that you were not aware of anything that was going on around you. There was no sensory input. It was a state in which you were aware, but there was nothing going on the mental field, so dreams, for example, but rather it was simply awareness itself, but still situated within the state of being a jivatman, that is, being a being who is in illusion. And in the same way that, interestingly, when you're sleeping and dreaming, when you wake up, often you don't remember a lot about your dreams. Well, then what to speak of this much deeper state in which you're not dreaming? You were aware, but when you wake up, you remember nothing of what you were actually experiencing. So there also, even when you're in that very deep state of sushupta, even when you're in that very deep state, God is there with you. Nārāyaṇa pervades that experience and is there with you at all times, even when you're in that dreamless, deep sleep state. But now there is this fourth state, turiya. That is the name of this fourth state. And turiya quite literally means fourth, the fourth state of awareness. And this is what is being spoken of here, where this great sage says that Nārāyaṇa pervades the various states and also exists beyond them. So beyond these three states that we just spoke about, in which the living being is still in illusion, there is a state that is beyond that, and that's called the fourth state. That is turiya. It is in that state that you are truly experiencing full consciousness in and of itself, residing in consciousness, no longer in illusion. That is Atman itself, the state of you experiencing yourself as Atman and living as Atman, as that pure drashtur, as that pure experiencer. So in other words, pure, unadulterated consciousness, and more phenomenologically, your experience of that consciousness as consciousness. This is what is known as turiya. So one could say this is synonymous with samadhi. One could say this is synonymous with atma jnana, of self-realization, because at this state you are experiencing yourself as pure Atman, and that is the center of your awareness and the state of your awareness. When you are experiencing that pure consciousness, yourself as pure consciousness, certainly then as well, Nārāyaṇa is there. Nārāyaṇa is pervading your reality also in that state. So again, this is a very interesting sentence where it explains that, in essence, what this is saying is, regardless of where you find yourself and what your state of awareness is, whether you are in the deepest illusion and just engaging in the material world in normative awareness and awakefulness, or whether you're sleeping, whether you're dreaming and sleeping, whether you're not dreaming and sleeping, whether you're beyond these three modes of, let's say, awareness that are constrained by illusion, whether you're in pure consciousness itself, whatever state of awareness you find yourself in, Nārāyaṇa is there. You are not alone, but Vishnu pervades all. So that is what this sentence is saying. Now let's go on a little bit. By entering the body of every living being as Paramatman, as the Supersoul, he enlivens the body, senses, life airs, and mental activities. Let's stop there for a moment. First of all, let's deal with the very first clause of this sentence. By entering the body of every living being as the Supersoul. So this is indeed Paramatman. You've heard me speak about this before. How? We have an unlimited number of living beings, Jivatmans, who are here within the material universe. An unlimited number of them. Not just humans. How many humans are there? How many animals are there? How many plants are there? How many insects? How many birds? How many aquatics? And then look at other planets. Oh, there are beings on other planets. You better believe it. There are so many planets within our universe that have life upon them, and in many cases higher than us, in some cases lower than us, in some cases equivalent. But how many beings are we talking about? And then again, we believe in multiple universes. However many beings there are, and truthfully they are unlimited, there is an infinite number of living beings, of finite Atmans. God is there present within the heart of every single living being. So thus, even when we fall into illusion and we find ourselves within this material world, engaging in our sojourn within this material world of following our desires, following our illusion, living as the false identity that we've convinced ourselves that we are, what is wonderful to know is that from the very beginning, the moment that we enter into any form of material body, God is with us. And God is there present as the Paramatman, as the Supreme Self. So again, we've looked at Upanishadic scriptures in the past, in previous live streams that talk about this, how there is a very clear distinction that is made in Sanskrit and in the Upanishads specifically, where there is Atman. Atman simply means our own true self, ourselves as a unit of consciousness, what in the West is sometimes called our soul, our spirit. There are many words for this, and the word that is used is Atman. So there is us. We are in here. We are the experiencer. We are experiencing everything around us. We are experiencing our own body, our own thoughts, etc. So thus knowing that we are separate from those things being the objects of experience, we being the experiencer. So there is us, there is Atman. But then there is something else. There is a second element that is there with us, and that is Paramatman, the Supreme Self. That is not us. That is God. And again, so many people, unfortunately, even in bad translations, have had for the last 100, 150 years, this very muddled, very confused idea that, Atman and Paramatman are just two different words for the same thing, and, we are Paramatman, and blah, blah, blah. No, those are lazy individuals. Those are lazy thinkers and lazy linguists. Those are people who are lazy with language, actually. Sanskrit is the most precise language upon the face of the earth. It is an absolute precision instrument, Sanskrit. And the reason why there are these two words, Atman versus Paramatman, is because they are two separate things. Indeed, we've looked at verses in the Upanishads where it describes them separately. It describes them very differently. It describes the qualities of Atman and then the qualities of Paramatman, and it's quite clear they're two different things. They're not the same in any way, shape, or form. Paramatman is God. And it is understood in the Vedic scriptures that in the same way that we are here, that is, I have my soul, I have my Atman, each one of us also has God within us, within our hearts as well. And God is ever present. God pervades who we are. And God is always by our side. This is why I say very often, we're never alone. We may sometimes feel lonely, but we're never alone. We don't have a reason to feel lonely because God is always there within us, and that is Paramatman, what is called here the Supersoul. So by entering the body of every living being as the Paramatman, as the Supersoul, now, this is what God causes for us. God is the source of all these things. This is what Narayana does. He enlivens the body, the senses, the life airs, the pranas. There are 5 pranas. The life airs and mental activities. So in other words, it is because of the very presence of God within us that all of these functions are indeed even capable of functioning. It is as a result of God being there present within us that our body can be enlivened and can do things, that our senses can operate in a wonderful way, and we can derive information about the world around us. That we have the pranas that are functioning, these 5 pranas that are there within us that give us vitality, and that we have mental activities. Indeed, it is because God is within us that we have the ability to even have sharp minds, to even have the sort of mental faculties that are necessary to make our way in this world, and then hopefully even more to transcend the world. It is all as a result of God's presence and God's grace that we have all these things, that we can have health, that we can have vitality, that we can have a body that functions. And yes, I know many of us, we have health problems. Our bodies, our minds, etc., don't function perfectly. That's our karma. Despite that fact, we need to be grateful always at all times to God that we have the ability to function at all, despite our karma. That indeed we have the ability to know Him by using our mind, by using our senses, by using our vitality, by using even our very bodies, etc., that we have the ability to know Him, to serve Him. We must be forever grateful for that mercy of God. But now let's go on. And thus all the subtle and gross organs of the body begin their functions. Indeed, it is God who is responsible for the fact that all of the organs of the body, all the functions of the body, and interestingly, it's explained here, the gross organs, but also the subtle. There are many subtle processes that occur also within the body that modern science, modern medical science, is only barely even aware of. There are still many mysteries to the physical body and how the physical body functions that are not mysteries to yogis, that are not mysteries to great rishis who actually understand the subtle organs that are there, the subtle functions of the body in addition to the gross organs. So it is as a result of God's grace and God's presence there within us that all these become operative, is what this verse is saying. And then finally, my dear king, this great sage is speaking to a king. He's not speaking to just anyone. You can imagine this. You can imagine the conversations. When I think about this, I'm always amazed actually at the quality of conversations that often take place in the Vedic scriptures. It's not, Hal, the newspaper guy in the corner, having a discussion with George, the shoe repairman. No, it's always a great sage speaking to a great king. It's a great king speaking to a god. It's a god speaking to another god. It's a god speaking to a sage, and on and on. So you can imagine the quality of the conversations that take place here. So he's addressing a king, and he says, my dear king, and he wouldn't lie to a king, know that Nārāyaṇa to be the supreme. Know that Nārāyaṇa to be the supreme. So important is this last sentence, that in naming this live stream, actually, I almost named it this. I almost named it Know That Nārāyaṇa to be the supreme. And I only did not because it would have been a little bit too long. I want to have a nice short title for this talk. But that's how important this last little sentence is especially. Number one, again, who is he speaking to? Who is this great sage speaking to? He's not speaking to just anybody. He's speaking to a king. Again, the quality of the conversation that's taking place here is crucial. This is why I went on and on a moment ago. My words are not superfluous. When I stress something, it's of importance. The reason why, just a short time ago, I was explaining how wondrous it is that the quality of these conversations that we see in the Vedic scriptures, that they're truly astounding. It's a sage speaking to a king talking to a god, etc., etc. So these are not just anybody speaking here. This is one of the great sages who is speaking here, and he's speaking to a king. This being the case, you would understand that truth is being conveyed here. It's not just opinion, it's not speculation, because a sage who would not lie to begin with certainly would not lie speaking to a great king. So thus, this gives weighted authority to this next clause. Know that Nārāyaṇa to be the supreme, not just anyone, but that Nārāyaṇa. So this verse ends really in the way that it began, speaking about who, with specificity, not vagueness. You see, when you have a spiritual teacher who is too vague with you, that's someone who's trying to cheat you. Always keep that in mind. When you ask an authority something, a politician, a so-called leader, sir, madam, I need an answer. Here's my question. And they give you a vague answer. You know you're being cheated. You know that person is not someone who is telling you the truth. We need specificity. So thus, to speak about God in general, in a very general, very vague sort of way, well, that's better than not speaking about God at all. But even better than that is speaking about God with enormous specificity, indeed maximal specificity. And that is what's being done here. God is named Nārāyaṇa. Know that Nārāyaṇa to be supreme, to be the supreme. And very specifically, he's named in the previous verse, which we looked at last week, as Nārāyaṇa. So this being the case, this great sage is telling this great king something that is the most authoritative truth, the most authoritative knowledge. and that is that this Supreme, who we have just been speaking about in this verse, who indeed pervades all things, who pervades all universes, who is the source of creation, maintenance, annihilation of the universe, who enters into the heart of every living being, who is responsible for their very vitality and health, etc., etc., that Supreme Being is not just anyone, but he has a name. God has a name. That name is Nārāyaṇa, Śrīman Nārāyaṇa. So this is the conclusion. This is the Siddhanta. This is the authorized conclusion of this verse. That indeed, this is the nature of God, that Nārāyaṇa or Vishnu indeed is all-pervading, that he pervades all reality, both spiritual and material reality, and it is as a result of his very existence and his very presence in any given thing that thing has its existence. So Nārāyaṇa is the first cause of all causes. Nārāyaṇa is the source of all things. Nārāyaṇa is he who pervades all. So with that ends my commentary on this verse. And at this point, I will signal to everyone that if you would like to ask any questions, either about this verse or about anything relating to Sanatana Dharma, please feel free to ask. And it would be my honor, my privilege to answer any questions that you have. Very good. Very nice. Here's an interesting, very practical question from Sri Ram, and it is, Namaste Acharyaji, my Dandavata pranams to you. Likewise. What is the Vedic perspective on having beards? Are they considered unclean for Vaishnavas and Brahmanas? Interesting question. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't consider myself to be unclean. On the contrary, I often take showers 2 or 3 times a day, actually, and I indeed have a beard now. I haven't always had a beard. It's come and gone. It's come and gone. You'll see images of me 20 years ago and I had a beard. And then you'll see images of me from the early 90s. I didn't have a beard. And then again, I didn't have a beard up until, maybe a year and a half ago. Now I have a beard. So it comes and goes, comes and goes. And what you also see is that throughout the history of Sanatana Dharma, that indeed you see Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, some of whom have beards, some of who do not. And again, some of them will go through various stages as well, whereas sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, as individuals, etc. So no, having a beard is an absolutely personal decision on the part of the individual, as is having long hair, etc. Indeed, if anything, the further back you go, for yogis, rishis, and this means Vaishnava yogis and rishis very specifically, actually, the further back you go into antiquity, the more it was the case that indeed they had long hair and beard, actually. The idea of shaving your head goes back actually to Shankaracharya and really to Buddhism, because Shankaracharya was imitating Buddhism in so many ways, both organizationally, a little bit philosophically. So thus, this is why so many scholars consider and have written that Shankara, philosophically, Shankara is really a crypto-Buddhist, but also in appearance as well. In appearance as well. This is why today in contemporary Hinduism, you have many individuals, including Vaishnavas, who will have a shaved head. Well, again, it was Shankara who seriously introduced this to the Vedic community. And again, it's not that there were not people who shaved their heads. There indeed were. There indeed were. Again, it was personal preference. But as far as great yogis, great rishis, great Vaishnavas from the past, etc., they tended to have long hair and beard, no beard. Again, it was up to the individual. So yes, this is a more modern sort of idea that beard is not good. No, if you could go back 5,000 years ago, 10,000, 100,000 years ago, and greet any rishi of the past, probably you would be looking into the face of someone with a beard. Very good. Very good. Good. Here's a good question. Does the tilaka, and the tilaka is the symbol that I'm wearing. It's wearing off a little bit at this point, but you can see it a little bit. Does the tilaka represent the footprint of God? If so, where is this found in the Shastras? Yes, indeed. That is indeed one of the things, it's not the only thing, but it is one of the things that the tilaka does indeed represent, is the footprint of God. So the idea being that we are practicing humility in that we are wearing the symbol of God's foot on our forehead, as if to say, my forehead. You know, you think of the typical person, you think of your forehead, that's a sacred place to you. That's where your eyes are, that's where your thoughts emanate from, etc. You know, the forehead is very personal to you. So what you're saying is that indeed Lord Vishnu is so sacred to me that I take his foot and I would put it on my forehead. So yes, that is indeed what it represents. As far as the second part of your question, where is this found in the Shastras? It's found very specifically in the Puranas. And I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly which Purana. Don't quote me on this, but I believe at the very least Padma Purana and Vishnu Purana, it is mentioned. Again, I read both of these works at least 35 years ago. So I can't remember if those were the two exact Puranas where this is mentioned, but I know that there are quite a few places in the Vedic scriptures and specifically the Puranic literatures where tilak is explained very specifically. I remember reading this a long time ago. Again, I can't quite remember which Purana. I believe Padma and Vishnu, maybe more, maybe several more Puranas. Very good. Very good. Here's a good question from Dharmachari. Namaste Acharyaji. Is it Shiva's power of destruction that necessarily overcomes Vishnu's sustaining function, or does Vishnu actively withdraw his sustaining power for destruction to occur? Very nice. Very good. It is two things. Let me answer this in this way. This is actually a question that we could go very, very, very deeply into, actually. But I'll just talk about two aspects of this. We could also talk about Vedic physics as well, which we're not going to just yet, or not with this talk at least. First of all, it is the latter. It is that Vishnu voluntarily withdraws his sustaining power such that now Shiva can enter the scene. If Vishnu were not to acquiesce, there's nothing Shiva could do, because Shiva is a servant of Vishnu, of Nārāyaṇa. So it's the latter. Also, it is in concert with Lord Vishnu's power of kala, of time, such that it is the nature, and this is where we get into the physics a little bit, but truthfully, we could go very deep. I'm barely scratching the surface. Let me just say this. It is also that Shiva is also acquiescing to the element of kala, of time. It is the nature of time conjoined with materiality, such that materiality necessarily goes through a process of destruction once it is in the form of an existent. So it is a natural process that occurs. But again, as far as Shiva as a conscious personality and being entering into the process and bringing about destruction, he does that as a servant of Vishnu, and because Vishnu indeed withdraws his sustaining power. Vishnu's sustaining power is, like Vishnu, eternal. And it is only because Vishnu wills that his sustaining power be withdrawn that destruction can take place. That is the nature of God. So I hope that makes sense. Very good. And also, Dharmachari, just as a personal aside, I emailed you. Please check your email. I don't know if you received that yet, but please take a look and you can get back to me. Very good. Very good. Here's a good question from Simon. Acharyaji, is Paramatman and Atman, both residing in the heart, developed in Vishishta Advaita school or Achintya Bheda Abheda school of Vedanta, or is it something shared among all schools of Vedanta? Good question, actually. It actually is something that's shared by all schools of Vedanta. Interestingly, even Advaita Vedanta. All schools of Vedanta accept this, and the reason why is because you cannot not accept it. It's not possible. It is in the Upanishads. Again, in previous live streams, we actually looked at verses that talk about this. So all the schools accept this. This principle that both Atman and Paramatman are there. The only difference being with Advaita, that Advaita says that in actuality there's no distinction between them, that they are one. And every other school of thought, every other school of philosophy that accepts Vedanta does not agree with that. They agree with what the Upanishads actually say, and that is that we are Atman, we are finite, limited spark of consciousness who has God as our source, and then Paramatman is indeed that God who is our source, who also resides within our heart. Every other school of Vedanta accepts what I just said, the only difference being Advaita, who again also accepts that Atman and Paramatman are there, but Advaita says, but they are one. And your illusion is thinking that they are not one, that they're not the same being. So again, this idea does not go back to only Vishishta Advaita or Achintya Bheda Abheda. It goes back to the actual scriptures. It goes back to the Srimad Bhagavatam, where there are verses that speak about this. It goes back to other Upanishads. Ultimately, it goes back also to the Upanishads, who talk about this very, very, very much in many of the Upanishads, how both Atman and Paramatman are residing within Hridaya, within the heart region. So it goes back to the scriptures. Very good. Very nice. Here is a very interesting question. Dear Acharyaji, what are some of the non-negotiables in Sanatana Dharma, things that one must do every single day in their lives? I am grateful for all your videos. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that wonderful comment. I'm grateful for you being here, actually, very much. And let me just say, this is not an easy question to answer, only because it depends on which aspect of Sanatana Dharma you're speaking of. And this is what I mean. Are you speaking about either simply being a general follower, or are you speaking about being a serious practitioner? Are you speaking about non-negotiables as a being who is on the path of sadhana versus a liberated being? But let me just say this, that when it comes to non-negotiables, very generally speaking, yes, there are several things that are non-negotiable. And that includes all the ethical principles of Sanatana Dharma. There are too many for me to go through right now. Again, we have previous videos where I talk about many of the ethical principles of Sanatana Dharma. These are non-negotiable regardless of whether a person is just a beginning practitioner or a serious practitioner, whether someone is just a nominal follower of Sanatana Dharma or someone who is a serious yogi, etc. You must follow the ethical principles of Sanatana Dharma. Another non-negotiable is the acceptance of the Vedic scriptures as your ultimate spiritual authority and as the source of all spiritual knowledge. This is a non-negotiable. If a person claims that they can make any claim, oh, I am a yogi, oh, I am a Hindu, oh, I am following Sanatana Dharma, oh, I am a Vaishnava, I am a Shaiva, I am a Shakta, I am this, I am that, I am an Advaitin, I am a Vishishta Advaitin. A person can make any claim, but if in addition to that claim, they also make the statement that, oh, but I don't accept the Vedic scriptures as a perfect source of spiritual knowledge, that person then is nothing of what they claimed. They're not a follower of Sanatana Dharma. They are not a yogi. They're not a Vaishnava, etc., etc., etc. So that's a non-negotiable. If a person is indeed any of these things, in other words, when it comes to the serious practice of any of these paths within the Vedic context, even an Advaitin, and you know I'm critical of Advaita as a philosophy, Oh, a serious, and I'm not talking about a new age neo-Advaitin. No, 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 no. I'm not talking about some so-called non-dual speaker who tours the country making money. No, I'm talking about serious Advaitin monks who are seriously following Shankaracharya. Even these people will say, we fully accept the authority of the Vedas, period. A true Advaitin will say that. A true Vishishta Advaitin will say that. A true Shaiva, a true Shakta, a true Vaishnava, etc. So this is a non-negotiable. So again, I can go on, but let me just say that there is also a non-negotiable for the Vaishnava very specifically, and that is to always remember Krishna, to always remember Vishnu at all times, and to never forget him. For the Vaishnava, that is our non-negotiable. So I hope that's the beginning of an answer. Again, I could go much, much deeper, but there are indeed several non-negotiables. Ah, interesting. Okay. Here is a question that one of my students and I were just discussing literally about half an hour before the live stream started, actually, but I will be happy to answer this. And that is, Jaya Shri Guru. Thank you for the satsanga. My pleasure. What is the Swami Nārāyaṇa Sampradaya, and is it acceptable for ISDS members to seek good association at Swami Nārāyaṇa Darshanas, BAPS, Bocha Sanwazi Aksha Purushottama Sangsta, is what BAPS stands for. So as you can see, I know this sect extremely well, and I have been studying them for 45 years. I first visited one of their temples when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old in Queens, New York. Then you say, thank you, Sri Acharya-ji. Yes, very nice. Let me say several things about the Swami Nārāyaṇa, and they're not a sampradaya. They are a sect. There are only 4 sampradayas. Several things. They are extremely good in 99% of everything that they are. This is a sect that is indeed an offshoot of Sri Vaishnavism, of Vishishta Advaita, as they themselves will usually very happily admit, actually. Their philosophy is pretty much non-different from the philosophy of Ramanuja Acharya. Their founder, Swami Nārāyaṇa, was an individual who was a very great sage. He was a very great yogi. He operated primarily in Gujarat. He didn't live for very long. I believe maybe no more than 50 years, something like that. But he had a very positive impact on Gujarat in that, indeed, he restored a very pure form of Vaishnavism to Gujarat. He himself, again, was a very great sage. Philosophically, we're in complete agreement. I'm in complete agreement with everything that I have read that he wrote, actually. There are several works that are translated into English that he wrote. I've read them all, and I'm personally in complete agreement. Again, it is a good Vaishnava sect. The only two drawbacks are these. That number one, unfortunately, rather than, as they should have, rather than seeing Swami Nārāyaṇa as a great sage, as possibly an Avesha avatar, rather they see him quite literally as a Purna avatar. They feel that he is an avatar of Narayana, of Vishnu. That is mistaken. The same thing with ISKCON. See, I always have to point this out when people in ISKCON are convinced that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an avatar, and I have to explain to them that no, he's not. He's an Avesha avatar. He was a great Acharya. He was a great sage, etc., but he's not an avatar. This is what happens very often with the more recent, let's say, religious movements within Sanatana Dharma. And when I say recent, I mean, the last several hundred years, is that they will have a great founder, and that person is a great sage. The person leaves the planet. The followers, in their grief and in their great devotion to that great guru, will then start to say, he wasn't just a great guru, he was Krishna himself. Well, the Gaudiyas did this with Chaitanya. The Swaminarayan people did this with Swami Narayana. it's a mistake. Swami Narayana was not God. He was a great sage, possibly an Avesha avatar. In fact, he seems to fit the bill for being an Avesha avatar. So this is the first problem, is that indeed they mistakenly think that Swami Narayana is God and they worship him as such. The second part is that the Swami Narayana movement does indeed tend to be radically ethnically oriented. In other words, if you go to their temple, it is a Gujarati movement. And they will be very welcoming of you if you visit their temple. They don't care who you are. They don't care your ethnicity. If you want to visit their temple, they'll encourage you to do so, and they are the sweetest people in the world. But to feel fully 100% comfortable in their temples, you have to be Gujarati for the most part. The pravachanas, the lectures, are given in Gujarati. Many of their writings and works are in Gujarati. The bhajans are in Gujarati, etc., etc. So sadly, in what should have been a truly Vaishnava movement, meaning a movement that is open to all sincere people, regardless of their specific ethnicity, the Swami Narayana movement is kind of bound ethnically. And again, that's another problem. ISDS, with the ISDS, we welcome all sincere people. We have many Indians who are involved from every language group in India. We have South Indians, North Indians, all sorts of Indians who are involved. We have Europeans, Australians, etc., etc., etc. So that's the difference. But in the meantime, as far as going to a Swami Narayana temple and having good association, I guarantee you would have good association. But as long as you keep those two things in mind, that they truly worship Swami Narayana as God, which is a mistake, and as open and welcoming as I guarantee you they will be, it's a Gujarati movement. And again, long term, you would feel a little bit out of place being there, where the population of these temples are 100% Gujarati. That's all. Otherwise, I love the Swami Narayana movement. I've been close with several of their leaders, actually. In fact, this is just as an aside. I gave a talk at the, I forget what it was. It was a massive function that that this sect specifically did in Chicago before they opened their massive temple there. And this must have been around 2002. And they had me give a talk to an audience of about 4,000 people to help them raise funds for their temple that is now built in Chicago. It's a beautiful temple. So again, I know many of the present leaders of the Swami Narayana movement, and they are the sincerest people on earth. So definitely seek their association. Very good. We have 2 minutes. So at this point, again, you have to forgive me. This inevitably happens. I'm no longer going to go sequentially. I'm going to look at many, many questions down the list a little bit and to see if I can maybe answer one, maybe two more questions that are especially interesting and striking. So please give me a moment as I start to look at some of these questions a little bit further down. This is a question I'm going to answer, actually, because it seems like an important one. It's a kind of a personal question, actually. And this is from J.O. I recently switched jobs from an overtly tamasic industry with stable hours to one that is not. I guess that is not stable, in order to improve my bhakti. But the hours have been short. How do I conquer my fear of poverty? Ooh. That is a very practical question. That is a very good question, actually. And yes, this is a tough one. On the one hand, indeed, to grow spiritually, you really want to avoid jobs that are extremely tamasic. So, for example, working with meat would not be good in any way. Working as a butcher, for example. I had at least one student, maybe more, who, they didn't work as butchers, but they worked close to such industries. And when they became devotees, very quickly they tried everything they could to get out of those industries, and they succeeded in doing that. yes, you want to avoid the tamasic industries as much as possible, but at the same time, indeed, you do want to survive. You do need to survive. This idea that, what it means to be a spiritual person is you just throw all concerns about poverty and money out the window into the air and you just starve to death. No, that's silly. You want to survive. You don't want to be in anxiety because you don't know where your food is going to come from. So this is what I would say. Spiritually speaking, indeed, it's good that you're no longer in a tamasic industry. But if you don't have the hours that you need to make enough money, try to get a second job if you can. Try to do something. Try to start your own little at-home business on the side. Sell things, you can sell things online, start a website, do anything that you need to fill up those hours so that you are indeed making money. So indeed, try to maintain a sattvic lifestyle, or at least not a tamasic lifestyle, even in your employment. But at the same time, yes, make sure you have enough money coming in so you don't have to be in fear. So you don't have to fear poverty. So you don't have to worry about paying rent, mortgage, anything like that. So again, try to get maybe a secondary part-time job or just do something at home where you can make money. Start an at-home business, an online business, sell things through eBay if you have to, do whatever you need to. To start online businesses these days is a lot easier than it was in the past. Look into that. And hopefully you won't have to go back to a tamasic job by, again, doing what I just said. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to see if maybe I can answer one more question. And again, I'm sorry that if it seems like I'm skipping several. Very good. This is the last question that I will answer, and it is, Namaste Acharyaji, are all four sampradayas able to grant one liberation and pure devotional service? Yes. Yes, they are indeed. They are indeed. This is why these are four recognized sampradayas, is because they are indeed recognized in the Vedic scriptures themselves, specifically in the Puranas. And these are four sampradayas which, if you follow what is taught in those sampradayas, both philosophically and practice-wise, sadhana-wise, if you follow the teachings of the acharyas of any of these four legitimate, authorized, authentic sampradayas, you can indeed have liberation and pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti, toward Vishnu, toward Nārāyaṇa. So indeed, all four of these sampradayas are legitimate. At this point, I am afraid I'm going to have to stop here because it's a little bit past the hour. And as I always have to do every week, I offer my apologies to those individuals for whom I could not get to your questions. As you can see, I try to answer questions not just in a quick, official sort of way. I try to give real answers. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time. And I try to answer as many questions as I can, but I can never, ever get to all of them. And again, for that, I apologize. Don't give up, though. If you have a question that's of importance to you, ask it again next Monday, the Monday after, and hopefully I will see your question and I'll have a chance to answer it. So with that, again, I want to thank you all very much for being here. Just to remind you, if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to this channel. Please like this video. Please comment on the video, especially once it's available as a recording. In addition to that, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. Please take a look at our books that are available there. We have quite a few books. We have approximately 10 with more coming. Actually, I made an announcement about that on several places. We have another book that is going to be released in late January. When you're on our website, dharmacentral.com, please sign up for our email list. And we will, in that way, keep you informed of all the latest developments that are happening in the ISDS. Indeed, we actually sent out a newsletter, just a few days ago, maybe 5 days ago, roughly, something like that. So many of you should have received that at this point, if you're on our email list. If not, join up now. Again, if you can, please consider becoming a member of the ISDS, the International Sanatana Dharma Society. When you become a member of the ISDS, you tithe a little something every month to the ISDS. And again, it can be as little as anything, $5, $10. It can be as much as the sky is the limit, whatever you can comfortably afford. But when you become a member of the ISDS, you help us to continue with all the many projects that we're doing, including this live stream and so many things that we're doing to restore Dharma to this world. And then finally, we are indeed in the midst of our year-end fundraising campaign, where we're trying to raise funds for the next year that is coming up. If you are moved to do so, I ask you to please give a donation. Again, if you go to dharmacentral.com, if you look on the menu, you'll see the donation page. And very simply through PayPal, you can give a donation. There are other ways too. We have the address. You can send a check if you prefer, money order, etc. But we ask that you please try to help us in any way that you can. If over the years any of these talks have inspired you, have given you hope, have helped you in any way, we ask that now, if it is within your means, and only if it is within your means, we ask that you please now give back, that you help us by giving a donation that will, again, help the ISDS to continue with all the projects that we are doing, including maintaining this beautiful temple that we have, where we have so many of our functions, but again, so many projects that we're engaging in. And with that, I thank you again for being here. And I hope that you can join us again next Monday. Jaya Shriman Nārāyaṇa. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Vansha Jayate. Om Hri Om. And with that, everyone, namaste. And please, in every way, until the next time we meet, take very, very good care of yourselves.